Okay, we'll get going. Welcome back, everybody, from our pre-Pesach, Pesach, and post-Pesach break. All the, I hope and I'm sure that all of the tremendous effort that went into making Pesach was fruitful, and everybody had a tremendous experience and had a tremendous Sidarim, and that there was a lot of ruchnius and a lot of light came down in those Sidarim and through the whole holiday of Pesach. And we find ourselves now here in Chodesh Iyar. Last night we counted the 16th day of the Omer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 16th day of the Omer. Last night we counted. And I want to welcome everybody back. So happy to see everybody and to get going back into the story of our lives by Rabbi Yaakov Klein, the current book that we're going through, which is, of course, the Lost Princess of Rabbi Nachman. What do you got to say, Shmuley? You want to give us our stuff that we always got to remember?
Yeah, so everybody check us out on YouTube, Breslov, Thornhill, look it up, subscribe, like, etc., all those things. And check out Rabbi Yaakov Klein's website, lpitorah.org. He can be found on YouTube as well. If you search for Lost Princess Initiative, I'm sure you can find his stuff there. And let's get started.
Read.
Okay, so chapter 14. So just before I read chapter 14, just a little recap of where we're up to. So the viceroy has just fallen asleep for the second time. The princess had instructed him, had given him instructions of a new set of instructions that were kind of similar to the old ones, but had seemingly made it a little bit easier for him. He didn't have to fast now on the last day. He just had to stay awake. Staying awake was the main thing he had to do. And alas, on the last day, he sees this strange river, this red river that smells like wine, and he says, "Never seen anything like this." And or he says rather to his servant, "Have you ever seen anything like this?" And he drinks from it, and he falls asleep for 70 years, and for a very long time, for 70 years, and that's where we are at the beginning of chapter 14. So chapter 14 goes like this. Many troops passed with a procession and equipment that accompanied them. The servant hid himself because of the soldiers. After the troops passed, a chariot and covered wagon approached. In it sat the princess. The procession stopped nearby. The princess descended and sat next to the viceroy. She recognized him. She shook him very much, but he did not wake. And that's the entirety of the text of the story for chapter 14. So, with that, let's
get into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a short chapter, but there's some really amazing, excellent points in it. Practical things here. Very, very special things. Everybody should know, by the way, that the next chapter, 15, is like the meat and potatoes of the entire Sefer. It's the biggest chapter, I think, and it's going to take us probably a few sessions to go through that one chapter. So we should make sure that we all have enough time to read it and think about it over the next week. But despite the shortness of this chapter, it doesn't have a lot of quality, but it's got tremendous... it doesn't have a lot of quantity, but it has tremendous quality. You know what I meant. Okay, let's go. So Rabbi Yaakov starts off by explaining what it means that the princess has been captured and why she's being paraded around with pomp and with ceremony and with troops and with processions and she's on the wagon in this procession, right? As we said many times before, that's not what we would expect in such a story. We'd expect that the princess was hidden away somewhere in a dungeon. That's where she was taken. But no, the princess is carried around with pomp and circumstance and processions and music and everything. Troops, a whole fanfare, right? So what does it mean? So the first thing that Rabbi Yaakov says over here, we can talk a lot about. He says that this is really all the Yetzer Hara is in this world. It's pomp and fanfare, right? The Yetzer Hara is not real. The Yetzer Hara is inflated. It's when things get inflated, right? And so we just came out of Pesach, right? And this is one of the understandings that we had about the difference between matzah and chametz, right? They're very, very similar. They're almost the exact same word, matzah and chametz, right? The only thing that separates matzah from chametz, right, is a few seconds, right? You put flour and water together. As long as you cook it before 18 minutes, it's matzah. If you leave it a few seconds later, right, it becomes chametz. It's a fine line between what we need to sustain ourselves and what is the pomp and fanfare of the Yetzer Hara. Chametz is called chametz because it arises. It puffs itself up, right? It blows up into something that's, in a certain sense, bigger than it really is. And it seems huge, it seems big, it seems important, and it seems maybe sometimes intimidating, but it's not real. Just like, I'm sure many people here have made challah before, right? Made a dough before, whatever it is, right? I told you the joke one time, it's not a joke, but one time I was asking my wife's 90-year-old grandmother for her pierogi recipe from the old country, and she's going to give me the recipe, right? So I wanted the recipe so I could make the pierogis from the old country. So she goes, first, you make a nice dough. And I'm expecting that she's going to tell me the ingredients in a nice dough, right? But no. That's the first step. Everyone knows how to make a nice dough, of course, right? First, you make a nice dough. Anyway, that's just a side story, a little joke. But when you make a dough, right, a nice dough, what happens? It starts to rise, and it gets big, it puffs itself up, right? But what happens if you just go to the table beside it and you give it a clap, right? Or you give it a little poke, it goes right back down to its essential size, let's call it, right? Because it inflates itself up, it becomes bigger than it really is. So too, this is the way the Yetzer Hara gets us in this world. This is what vanity is. This is what fears are, right? We're going to see, he says over here, where does he say it? Here, this is a good line. This is on page 228, about halfway down. He says, be it as a result of physical desires, fear, financial stress, sadness, confusion, or the myriad responsibilities of daily life, we become detached from the foundation of our existence. The inner viceroy falls asleep. What happens? All of these things that are not so big become very, very big. We become filled with fears. What's going to be, right? I've talked to so many people recently about how they're very afraid about what's going to be with their children. Something's happening they're not talking to me in the right way, or they're not progressing the way they should, or they're thinking thoughts that I don't agree with. They're doing things that I don't agree with. So many people have struggles with their children, right? And when a parent has a struggle with their children, it's all consuming. It hurts so much. It's so difficult. It's so painful. It takes sometimes the life force out of us. We're left with nothing, right? It's very, very, very hard. I'm not saying that it's not an important issue and that it's not a big thing that we have to work on, but we make it bigger than it should be. Why? Because we don't live with the emunah that we should have, and we're going to see why that's important. We think that the whole world is up to me, and that everything about this child's life and his future and past and present and everything that's going to be with them is up to me. And if I don't do it, then it's not going to happen, right? And that is a tremendous weight to carry. It's a gigantic yoke to carry on the shoulders of a parent. A parent should be worried about their child and should do everything they can to help their child and to fix their relationships and to do whatever they can. But it always has to go together with powerful emunah that says, I know Hashem runs the world. I know Hashem loves me. I know Hashem loves my child. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to try really hard to do my part. But then I'm going to have emunah that Hashem is going to take care of us. And that this child is going to lead the life that they have to lead. And sometimes I don't like it. And sometimes it's hard for me. Sometimes I think they should be on a different path. But I gotta let them live the life that they're supposed to live. They have to go through their journey. Just like I'm on a journey, they're on a journey. And I have to have that emunah. And I have to wake up every morning and go and see that child and say, okay, another day of it's going to be really difficult. But the Ribono Shel Olam's with me. And I just got to do my best. With a smile, with confidence, with love for that child, I'm going to do my best. And I know Hashem is going to take care of the outcome. You see the difference? If I approach that day knowing that I'm going to do my part and that Hashem's going to take care of the rest, Hashem takes care of the outcome, right? It's so much smaller than the world is crumbling in front of my eyes. And this difficulty with my child is a reflection is on me. It means that I'm the worst person in the world, and that I'm miyayesh. I'm giving up hope that I'm never going to have a relationship with my child. It's never going to be good. Chas v'shalom. This is big. This is huge. This is chametz. This is the Yetzer Hara saying all those things, right? Mashen kein. If we just approach every day, right, with emunah. And with today, I'm going to do what I can. It's a whole different story. That's taking that dough and giving it a little punch and watching it fizzle down. It's going to be hard the next day also, right? But I'm not going to let it grow into that unmanageable, gigantic beast. You here? You with me, Shmuley? Maskim?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah? Gedalia Fenster says sometimes that one of the big mistakes that a person can make that can drag a person down is not staying in their own lane.
Right, Sandra?
Meaning, you have certain ideas of how things should be and how you're going to fix them, and it's all about what I'm going to do and my perception of the situation. And there's certain things. Your lane means staying in your lane means I'm going to do my part, hishtadlus, one foot in front of the other, within reason. And I'm not going to worry about anything else at all. All I can worry about is my lane, what's in front of me. And the rest, you have to understand, is up to Hashem, and there's a much bigger plan than any of us understand. And, it's going to play out according to that plan, not according to my plan or your plan.
It's so good. Stay in your lane. That's the vort, right? Yeah. Stay in your lane. So this hits a number of other aspects also. Right, there's the fear aspect, which we spoke about by children. There's one more situation that was an experience that I experienced with somebody, and I have mentioned it in some other classes. I don't know if we've said it in this group yet, but I knew a person who let's remember before we say this that the Yetzer Hara is called a ruach shtus, a spirit of folly. Right, of being confused, of stupidity, really, right? And the Gemara says, "Ein adam oisev over avera el imkein nichnas by ruach shtus." A person doesn't do a sin, an avera. A person doesn't get caught by the Yetzer Hara unless a spirit of folly comes over them. Meaning, if we're clear and we're connected, we're never going to do an avera. It has to be that something comes over us that makes us cuckoo. If we're going to do something like an Avera or fall into the trap of the Yetzer Hara, right? So I had this person that I'm close to, and they called me one time, and they were like, they could barely talk. They haven't been sleeping. They've haven't been eating. They haven't gone to work. They're so stressed. They're so worried. Why? Because they weren't paying their taxes properly, and they finally, after a number of years of avoiding their taxes, they were stuck with a bill from the government and collections of something like $150,000. It's not a wealthy person who could pay this back in half a year, but this person was paralyzed completely with fear. This bill that they were faced with, and this kind of like coming together of all of their negligence, right, in that one moment, was so big to them. They couldn't eat, they couldn't sleep, they couldn't go to work. What am I going to do? They're going to take my house. Am I going to go to jail? They just were filled with ruach shtus. So I talked to this person for a while, and I said to them, like, listen, you're not going to go to jail. And they're like, what do you mean? How do you know? And I was like, don't worry, you're not going to go to jail. It's okay. And they're like, well, what do I do? How am I going to do that? And I said, listen, don't worry about it. This person had a business. It's like, you'll call them and you'll speak to them about it and you'll tell them, I don't know what to do. How am I going to pay this off? How are we going to work it out? And, there's lawyers that specialize in representing clients in this way. You're not unusual. There's many, many, many people in your exact situation. Long story short, after a few months, this person did just this, figured things out, and was put on a plan to deal with this. And it happened to be in the next 2 years, they had enough tax refunds because of, properly doing their taxes finally, that the amount went away over 2 years, and it was done. So I said to that person afterwards, I said, do you remember how you were feeling at that moment when you were faced with that bill, with that realization, and you literally could not eat or sleep? You couldn't go to work. You were paralyzed. You thought you were going to die, right? What do you think about it now? Where did that go? Why didn't it get you? Right? And the way that I like to explain it is to say we can lose our minds and go crazy over a potential negative future that will likely never come to exist. This is what we can do. We can go crazy because of a potential negative future that will likely never come to exist. That is spirit of folly, ruach shtus, yetzer hara, chametz. It's not real. It's not real at all. It never will be. But it can take us out of this world. It can make us feel like the worst thing we've ever felt before. Chas v'shalom. So this is why the yetzer hara, the procession over here, is a huge procession. It looks gigantic. It's got troops. It's got music. It's got everything. A big, gigantic procession, right? And this is what we see. And it can terrify us and it can be intimidating to us. But we have to know the truth, that it's not real. It's absolutely not real. Rabbi Nachman tells us in another Torah, I believe that it's Torah Tesvav, number 15, I think, 15 or 25. 15, where he says that there's a power of yira in the world, of fear in the world. And our power and capacity for yira, for fear, has only one place ever that it should be directed. And that is to Hashem. That's the only place our yira should ever go. We should be in total awe of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But as soon as we take that fear and that awe away from Hashem, you know what happens to that awe and that fear? It encloses itself around a tax bill. It encloses itself around a debt, around fears of global instability. The fear will take a hold of a person if we don't put it in the right place. We'll be afraid of COVID. We'll be afraid of even after COVID now, or whatever. For some people it's after COVID. But now people are just afraid of other diseases much more than they ever were. Right? People are afraid.
Afraid of the end of COVID.
People are afraid of there being no more COVID.
Seems like.
Yeah. Whatever side you're on, there's plenty of fear. You don't have to look too far. Don't worry. Right? But it's all ruach shtus. It's all insanity. Right? And it's not real. It's not real. Right? Like we're gonna find how many of us here have been learning together for how many years now, right? And go back. Some people many years, right? Go back 10 years, whatever, however long I've known you guys for, whoever you are, and think about the number of things you've been afraid of in those years. The number of things that have come up that you thought your life was over. You thought you couldn't get through this, right? Where are they now? Right? I don't want to keep doing Pesach, but we got to take Pesach with us. V'hi shamda, right? V'hi shamda lav v'seinu v'lanu shebechol dor v'dor amar aleinu l'chalaseinu. It's not just the nations that stand up every generation to get us. That's a picture of how life is. We're always going to have these things that stand up to try and knock us out, these fears. But you know what? A few years down the road, you're going to look back and you're going to say, oh, it was literally nothing. I just allowed it to take me over. This is the danger of the procession of evil in the world. Right?
So there's an interesting difference between the first time that the viceroy falls asleep and the second time that he falls asleep. The first time, the thing that messes him up, that causes his downfall, is he's been fasting presumably, and he sees this apple, and it looks so delicious to him, and he goes for it and he eats it, and they say that represents a downfall that was brought on by taiva, by desire, by desiring things that a person shouldn't desire. That's one kind of thing that can happen to a person, that can prevent a person from being able to grow and to progress and get to higher levels. The second time, it's a little bit different. He has the instructions that he has, but as we discussed, actually I didn't discuss with you guys, I think I missed that shir. The chapter was called The Trap of the Fascinating Permitted, right?
So awesome.
He finds an interesting thing that doesn't make sense. Right, this river that looks red and it smells like wine, but it couldn't possibly be wine, right? And and he starts making justifications and reason. He starts thinking too much. Essentially, he should have just like we said the first time, he should have just gone. Like he's been waiting so long. Like he has a job today
He's literally on the way
on his
to
agenda
the princess.
is to go to the princess. That's what he should have done. Instead, he starts thinking and all this stuff, and it's more of a intellectual kind of battle, right? And we see that so then it proceeds into this situation where he's sleeping, and now it starts getting piled on with all these troops of the Yetzer Hara, and he's getting mixed up with all of these confusing ideas, let's call it, that's keeping him asleep, and we know that the servant represents the intellect, right? He hides he's no longer of help in this situation, right? Because it's actually that's messing him up, right? It's his intellectual thoughts. So there's a different, and it's interesting. And so the first time is taivas, is desires, and in a way it's easier to at least recognize what's wrong, right? If a person is stuck in their taivas and their desires, it's easy to identify that and say, okay, you know what? I know this is wrong. But once a person starts making intellectual justifications for why, of course you should be afraid of a big tax bill. And of course you should be afraid of how are my children, doing in school? And how are they going to, am I teaching them right? And am I in the right community? And am I in the right country? And am I in the right shul? And do I have the right, you start getting, involved in all. I mean, actually, some of those things are probably good things to think about. But when we're talking,
think about them for sure.
Think about them for sure.
Yeah.
But it has to be, but not to get totally bogged down and dragged down by them. There should be a separation though between things I think that are in, kedusha and raising your children versus things that really, chametz stika, things that really are not so important, that we really shouldn't. Stuff that's outside of our lane. Anyway, so you see that this was an attack, was and is an ongoing attack on the person's intellect, and in a way, it's much more dangerous because people can get convinced of all kinds of ideas.
Right.
It's you can.
So it's a really important
stop
idea.
Thinking for yourself, and you get other types of thinking injected into your mind, and it's
100%.
A person can. That's where a person can get lost for a lifetime.
Right.
Convince yourself it's okay. Somehow rationalize it in your mind. It's okay.
Not just that it's okay, but that it's right.
Right.
That it's right.
So you know what? The stay in your lane, I think stay in your lane is an important point in this particular chapter, because really it applies everywhere. It's just what is the lane, depending on what aspect of our life we're talking about. So when we're talking about thinking about our kids, thinking about our finances, thinking about things that are important, we all, of course we have to think about them, and we have to do what we can in those realms. No question, right? But the question is, when do I leave my lane? When do I start to, instead of thinking about what can I do and what am I going to do today, right? I start to go into a place of worry and fear and yush, despair, loss of hope, right? And just pain and suffering about the future, like we said, that doesn't even happen and may never happen, It's not even real, right? That's leaving my lane. Rabbi Yaakov speaks about here, and then Rabbi Nachman speaks about that we can always just get into a, like, let's call it like a pure intellectual, pursuit, right? So Rabbi Nachman was very, very against learning and talking philosophy just for the sake of philosophy. He's very against it. Some groups in Yiddishkeit are interested in philosophy. Rabbi Nachman was like, stay away from this. It's not good. Just to get your mind involved in intellectual, pursuits that are not necessary. But before we get into there, I want to go into this next part in a specific way, because I love this next part. I think it's super important, and it really hits home for me because I experienced this myself in a certain way, right? So imagine we're in this situation where we're getting out of our lane. We're allowing our intellect. So let's remember, the servant is the intellect, right? And while we're asleep, while the viceroy is asleep, the viceroy is our inner tzaddik, right? The viceroy is our searcher and our spiritual connection. And while our inner tzaddik, our viceroy, is asleep, what's awake is the intellect. And the intellect is what's going to get battered with the whole procession of evil. It's going to get battered with fears. It's going to get battered with trying to understand things that I can't understand. It's going to get battered with all of the information that we currently, consume, or maybe more accurately, are force-fed nonstop all day long. And fear and pain and negativity. Every bad story that's happening in the world is what comes across our screens, right? We don't get good news. We don't get Nekudas Tovos. They just pick every scary, bad thing they can find, and that's what they show us, right? Because that's apparently what pays the bills. So that's where we are. We're in this place, and our intellect is overloaded with all of this information and everything that's going on, and the struggles we have in our lives, and the things that we have to deal with and figure out, and our parnasa and our kids and everything, and what did he say over here? The responsibilities of daily life. Like, it's enough already. It's so much. There's nothing. And if the viceroy is asleep, if my soul is asleep, my connection, my spark, my light is asleep, and all I have is that, what am I going to do? So this is what he says. The servant, the intellect, hides when he sees all of this.
Not only that, you see the first time around, when it's the taiva, the desire that caused him to go off, the intellect actually tries to wake him up.
Right.
Whereas this time, no such thing.
The intellect is running and hiding.
He's being attacked from all sides, and he's hiding.
So he says over here, I want to read a few of these things inside. One in particular is one of the most beautiful pieces of writing in the whole book so far. But he says like this: under attack by the challenge of faith potentially embodied in the entirety of our existence, the Jewish response is to close our physical eyes to the external smokescreen and open our inner spiritual eyes. This allows us to perceive the intuitive awareness of Hashem's light that shines through the prisms of our many conscious and subconscious memories of contact with His presence. What is he saying over here? The place where we have to go when we are experiencing what the viceroy is experiencing now is not outward. We don't have to research, and we don't have to look at everything that's in the news and everything in the internet. We have to go inward, right? We have to remember that I'm not an animal. I'm not just an accident. I didn't just evolve from apes purely, necessarily, so that I'm just some kind of experiment in the physical world. I am a soul that is here in this world to accomplish a mission. I am a piece of godliness. This is who I am. And when I'm stuck asleep like this, I have to go inward, because that's the place where I'm going to find my connection at that time, right? He says, listen to this. This is a quote. By the way, he doesn't say who this is. I'm sure he has a good reason. I know who says this quote, but just because Rabbi Yaakov didn't say who it is, I'm also not going to say who it is. But listen to this, how beautiful this sentence is. The essence of Jewish religious thinking does not lie in entertaining a concept of God, but in our ability to articulate a memory of moments of illumination by his presence. That means that it's not about a discussion about God. It's not about trying to figure out something intellectually, philosophically about God. It's about experiencing God and remembering the times when I've had a religious experience. Remembering the times when I've had a powerful connection, right? Remembering the times when I've had an awakening. Something's happened, right? It's not about a discussion. It's about a relationship, is the way that I feel he's explaining it over here, right? Because, I had this experience when I was first studying in yeshiva. It was a type of yeshiva that was very, very much only intellect based. It was great. It was very exciting, right? But it was very intellect based, very academic kind of in a certain sense, and I loved it. But I remember at the time there was one rabbi, a very big rabbi, right? And he was talking about people going down to the kotel. And you know what he said? He said, people go down to the kotel and they touch the wall and they say they feel something. He's like, you can't feel anything. You can't feel Kedusha, right? You don't have a feeling of Hashem. That doesn't exist, right? And I was like, interesting. I didn't, I didn't really know that. But I took his word for it because he was, a big rabbi who was teaching at the time. But I remember at that moment feeling kind of disappointed. I mean, really? That's it? We're just reading books and intellect and there's no feeling, there's no connection. Because I went to the kotel and I did feel something. I had a very powerful experience there. Right? And since then, I can't explain the incredibly, unbelievably powerful spiritual experiences that I've had. Right? So I was so disappointed. This is what Rabbi Nachman is telling us in this story, and what Rabbi Yaakov is telling us, and what this amazing quote is telling us, is that our relationship, I don't even want to say Judaism, our relationship with God is not philosophy. We're not talking about God. Our relationship with God is meant to be a relationship where we connect and we have an experience. This is what a Jew is supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be like this. And if we don't try and do this, what are we? We're robots. We might as well just go to university and study something else, right? It's not just an intellectual thought about God. It's like, you guys hear me rant sometimes. I know I'm in the middle of a rant right now, but I'm going to interrupt this rant with another rant, right? You know how I say it always bothers me when people are very into the concept of emunah in certain groups. And you could read a whole book written about emunah, but you know what it is? It's a book talking about emunah. But that's not what emunah is. You have to do things to give you emunah. You have to experience emunah, right? I heard so many people for so many years talking about emunah. The word emunah would fly here and fly there, but no one ever told me that you can really have emunah. Every Jew can really have emunah and can really live with emunah. Until I met Rabbi Nachman and Rav Arush and these people who are hyper focused on emunah. And Rabbi Nachman gives us everything we need to actually live with emunah and to feel emunah, to have a relationship with Hashem, to feel a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? This is what we need. We need to have these things. We need to have hisboidedus. If you didn't have hisboidedus, if you didn't go out and talk to Hashem, we said it so many times over Yontif, over Pesach, in Hallel, right? One of the things Rav Arush always loves to say, He'amanti ki adaber, right? That those words mean literally, I believe because I speak. Right? When I talk to Hashem, he would always say, if you talk to Hashem, you'll have emunah. If you don't talk to Hashem, you don't have emunah. Right? You have to have a relationship. We don't go out and start using the intellect. What does Rabbi Nachman tell us the intellect does in this situation? The intellect has to hide, has to lay low, and you got to go into relationship mode. this is the way I understand this over here. There's another way I understand it, but maybe you want to. Anything you want to say?
Yeah,
here?
no, it's interesting how you're saying it. I'm just thinking here, as you're saying it. I guess a person cannot have emunah without having experienced some relationship with God. You cannot intellectually know what emunah is, or in a way that you can have it.
Yeah. Remember, emunah is not I believe in God. I believe in God. I've decided that I think God is real. That's an intellectual decision. Right. I read something, I saw some facts, and I've decided that that's correct. That's not emunah. That's just I figured something out. Right? Emunah is now when my life is different because of that fact. I have a relationship and an experience that changed my existence.
And once you've had that experience, even if a person finds themselves in this situation of being asleep, even for a long time,
right?
What we're saying here, it's the recall of that experience that ultimately can bring you out of it. And that's why in the story it says nobody's able to wake up the viceroy.
Yeah.
It has to. Rabbi Nachman says so in Torah Samach in Likutei Moharan, which is very closely. It was said shortly after Rabbi Nachman said the story of the lost princess, and there are a lot of the themes of the lost princess are found in this Torah from Rabbi Nachman. So much so that Rabbi Yaakov Klein included a little synopsis of some of the main points in the back of the book. It's one of the appendix sections. So it says there it says in Torah Samach that when a person is in this state of sleep, there's no way, nothing and nobody external can wake them up. It has to come from within. He does go on to say that when a person has that stirring, it's helpful, that what's called a sarusa dilasata. It's a movement that comes from below, meaning it's not someone inspired you and so you woke up to something. It's something that has to come from inside. So this recall of an experience, let's call it. He does say that when that happens, when a person gets sort of woken up, it is helpful to have another person there to kind of help him come out of it more. Mm-hmm. But the actual waking up has to come from within. I'm reminded. I want to see. Do you have the Rabbi Weinberger Haggadah?
Not handy.
Not handy at all.
Yeah. No.
Okay. There was a story in there, but I don't remember. Or it was actually a poem in the introduction. Do you remember that? No. Okay. All right. Anyway. Yeah. So it's something that has to come from within, and he mentions here about Kriya Shema. The number. The top thing that Jews do to exclaim their emunah in the world is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Right? That's what we do, where we cry out. And what do we do when we say Kriya Shema? We cover our eyes, because it has nothing to do with anything that's external of us when we say that. When we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, it's an internal experience of that oneness, of that knowing that Hashem is there and that He's together with us and that we are one with Him and one with other Yidden.
Awesome.
Right?
He says over here, right, that we see, like, just to back up what Shmuel is saying over here, he says that when the viceroy is asleep over here, so the princess comes and tries to wake him up, and she's shaking him, but he won't wake up, right? And this is where we see in the story that it has to come from inside. Something has to wake us up, right, from inside. I just want to give a couple examples of this that I think are really awesome. Rabbi Nachman says a number of times also that when a person is in such a state where they're really sunken down and things are not moving, they have no spiritual awareness, right? When we're in this state of sleeping, that the other thing that we keep with us, that we always have to hold strong to, is halacha, right? Just Torah and mitzvahs, right? Even when I don't feel like it, I still pray, I still put on my tefillin, still light candles, I still, whatever I do, right? All the mitzvahs. I don't feel like it, but I still hold on to them, right? Because those are anchors that keep us connected. That are going to be those points through which we can come back. There's a number of stories that are totally amazing, right? Where like you hear about some of these people who are descendants of Marranos, right? The hidden Jews of like Portugal, right? Portugal, yeah, and how they would always remember, for example, that every Friday night their mother would light candles in the closet, And they didn't know why, but they did this. And it kept along for a couple of generations until at some point someone had an awakening from this. And they said, what's going on? Why do we do this? And something pulled them to look deeper and deeper, and they found out what it was, and they reconnected to Yiddishkeit and to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? But that was like a sleep of lifetimes, like he's talking about over here. And they were able to wake up from that. There's an amazing story. I don't remember all the details, which is good. That means I won't say it so long. But there's an amazing story about Bekitzer, that there was a boy in like one of the Arab villages surrounding Eretz Yisrael, and for some reason he ended up close to a synagogue on Friday night, and he listened. As he was walking by, he heard something, and he was compelled to go into the synagogue, and so he sat there at the back of the synagogue, and they saw him there, and they were like, they didn't know what he was doing there. Next week, the same boy is in the same place at the same time, Friday night, right? And so after a couple of weeks, someone asked him, like, what are you doing here? Why do you keep coming here just at this time? Who are you? And the boy said that I don't know why, but I cannot hold myself back from coming here. You sing this song. He was talking about Lecha Dodi, which we sing to bring in Shabbos. And he's like, I have a memory, I think it was of his grandmother, singing this song. And the boy grew up as an Arab boy, and he remembered that his grandmother used to sing this song, Lecha Dodi, and now he heard it, and it sparked such a fire in him, that memory and this amazing, beautiful song, that he was compelled. He couldn't help it. And he ended up coming back and reconnecting once again to Yiddishkeit and to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? So people have these things that are there, that keep us, that help us to hang on, and that wake us up from within, right? It's totally amazing. Yeah, well, there's another story, but I'm not gonna say it now. But what we're saying over here, and he said to finish off that quote that I said over here, he said, Am Yisrael is not a people of definers, but a people of witnesses. Pesach says, you are my witnesses. Meaning, we're not just talking about Yiddishkeit and Hashem. We are Yiddishkeit. Our lives are, that's Judaism. The way we live, our actual connection to God, our actual living connection, our soul, that's what it is. It's not a university course, right? Which I think is so important, and I think one of the main points over here. But he goes on to say over here that there's such positivity at the end of this chapter, right? Because we're thinking, what's going on here? The viceroy's asleep, the intellect's running away, the soul's asleep, the intellect's hiding. What do we have going for us? What do we have going for us? Right? So he says, with tremendous chizuk over here, that when we reach that place, the Shechina, the princess, recognizes the viceroy. Right? The princess recognizes the viceroy, and she tries to wake him up. She herself tries to wake him up. What does that actually mean? What does that actually mean? Listen to this. With these words, the Holy Rebbe is speaking to our souls. Don't think that after you have fallen these 2 times and deserted the Shechina, that they no longer recognize you above. On the contrary, the Shechina descends to you and recognizes you. They still take tremendous pride in you above. The Shechina, the divine presence, still tells you, you are a holy soul. You're a holy neshama. And the divine presence, whatever, I don't know what this means yet, but it's trying to wake you up. Right? God forbid we should ever think, we shouldn't believe what we make up about ourselves. You know how we always talk about, you got to find the good points, the nekudas tovos, azamar l'kai ba'idi, right? We always have to find our good points. That's what you can never look at yourself and say, oh, I'm gone. I'm done. Right? I fell one time and I slept for 2 years. I fell another time, I slept for 70 years. Right? I'm done. My soul's crushed. My intellect is overboard. Hashem doesn't want me anymore. Right? Hashem's the only one who still knows who you really are. Even when you don't know who you are, Hashem still knows who you are. Right? And we're going to wake up. It's going to happen. Right? Remember the end of the story. We're going to find the princess. It's going to happen. Right? So we always have to remember. It's so important. No, Shmuley?
Yeah, just to point out on that, it says that the Shechina descends to you and recognizes you. It says specifically the Shechina, which is the aspect of Hashem that resides within us. So just further, to that point that it is something that comes from within. It's that part of it. It's not necessarily the God up in the heavens. It's the thing that we feel inside of us.
Right.
Right.
The Shechina is also called Knesset Yisrael,
right,
which means it's in a certain sense it's our deeper soul connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's what's going to wake us up. Something from within is going to wake us up.
So just one other point that from Torah Samach of L'Chutei Moharan, Rabbi Nachman says that when a person is in this state of deep sleep, this 70-year-long sleep, waking him up normally is not going to work. But he says, so what do we do to wake up such a person? He says it's necessary to enclose the panim, which means countenance, which means that's what a person's face looks like when they are awake. In order to restore that to a person, it has to be enclosed in stories, right? Which is one of we talked about this all the way back in the beginning of this year, that Rabbi Nachman started telling stories, Sipurei Maisias. He started telling these stories towards the end of his life already, after he said, I've taught you wonders of wonders, all kinds of amazing things, and I see now I have to teach you stories. That was because many people were still asleep. Yeah. So what is it about stories? I can relate to this so strongly. Just this whole difference between an intellectual approach to learning about God versus just something that strikes you inside somewhere, right? Where the Shekhinah is recognizing you and you're recognizing it. Right. So we hear stories, people tell that there's all kinds of fantastic storytellers today and throughout our history, right? We had a whole, category of Rebbes and Rabbanim who were called Magids, right? A Magid, right? The Dubna Magid and the Magid of Mezrich and et cetera, and each town had a Magid. A Magid was someone who came and told stories to arouse feelings inside of people. Right. So what Rabbi Nachman is telling us is that there are things that are enclosed. There's very deep concepts and very high Torah that can be enclosed within stories that can arouse a person who is sleeping in a way that nothing else can.
Yeah, mamish. And this story in particular is one of those stories.
Well, that's right. Yeah. So it's a
such an awakening story. If you could remember, also one of the things we said about stories way back in the beginning, which fits together so beautifully with this, is that what is it about a story that really grabs us? It's because we see our own lives in that story. We see our own experiences in that story. That's why the book is called, by the way, The Story of Our Lives, because this story is a story about us, and it's once we see ourselves in that story that's why it's awakening from within us, because it's not we heard something and we thought, oh, that's cool. It's we saw this story and we realized, wow, that's me. I'm awakening from within myself, which is exactly what we're talking about here. The last piece of chizuk, the last piece of positivity to finish up on, right? Which is so awesome again, is that another reason why we should be hopeful. And why we should never have yush, we should never despair, right? And we've learned this in many Torahs in L'Chutei Moharan in a different way in each Torah, right? Such a powerful idea, and that is that when the viceroy is at the lowest of the low, he's mamish in the lowest place he's ever been. He's failed twice in his attempt to actually go and free the princess. He's slept his whole life away, a whole 70 years away. Twice now he's slept. He's down at the bottom. His soul is covered up, asleep. His intellect is hiding, right? It seems like the worst of the worst, right? It's pedavka when a person feels like this, that I'm at the lowest of the low, I'm at the worst of the worst, there's no lower that I can go. Who comes by at that, who can be found right at that moment? Is the Shekhinah. Right at that moment is where the princess comes right to you. Right? It's only when we find ourselves in those places that we're able to access this tremendous holiness. We've seen how many times the concept of Yerida Tachlis Aliyah, that the reason why we have to go down and experience lows in our lives is because through those lows are the way we're able to get up to the highs, right? Like a springboard, right? We saw that the lower down we have to go, the more the challenge is, the deeper the struggle is, the greater the holy spark of Kedusha is that's hidden down there, right? If I'm going so low down, it means that I have the power to elevate something that's much greater than someone who doesn't have such a struggle, right? In other words, when I'm down low, I know sometimes it's hard to hear it when we're in that moment, but when I'm down low, it's because of my greatness that I'm so low. It's because I'm about to do something amazing that I'm low right now. I'm on a trampoline and I went down so low, I jumped high, I got down so low that from that low place I'm going to spring up higher than I ever could before, right? We saw another Torah in the Kutim Ran where he said that once you experience a challenge, it's not because you're in a low level. It's because you actually just broke through to a higher level of existence. And now in that new higher level of existence, there's a new set of challenges to deal with in that higher level. They're all saying the same thing. When I find myself in a place of challenge and difficulty, suffering even, I have to always remember that it's not a sign that Hashem has abandoned me. It's completely the opposite. It's that Hashem is guiding me and is right there with me and knows that this is going to bring me to something totally amazing and tremendously high levels of Kedusha. So these are the positive things that we have to take with us. Because I know we all experience challenges on varying different levels at different times in our lives. And Rabbi Nachman prepares us for this, right? The last thing I wanted to say, I can't hold this one back. Very quick. What's another thing that we get to hang on to? And this one, really, I could speak about it for like an hour, but I promise I won't, don't worry. The main time that Rabbi Nachman talks about sleep, being asleep, is when he talks about Rosh Hashanah. And that Rosh Hashanah is a time when we have to wake up. That's why we're forbidden to sleep on Rosh Hashanah, right? You're not allowed to sleep on Rosh Hashanah. And you're supposed to fast the day before Rosh Hashanah. It's all these days, each day, when the viceroy is supposed to go get the princess, it's Rosh Hashanah also in the story. But Rosh Hashanah is a time to be awake, right? And Rabbi Nachman told us, and his students later developed it further, that no matter what's going on, the best thing that a Jew can do for themselves, said Rabbi Nachman, is to be together with Rabbi Nachman on Rosh Hashanah, right? He said, Rosh Hashanah sheli ole al hakol. My Rosh Hashanah is greater than everything, right? And there's a lot of songs, there's a lot of ideas about it, but I just want to tell you a personal experience because, I didn't used to be a person who would say such a thing, right? But for me, the biggest source of what this chapter is talking about is going back in my mind, in my soul, to re-experience being with Rabbi Nachman on Rosh Hashanah. Being in Uman on Rosh Hashanah. Such a tremendously high, powerful soul experience. Like out of body, out of mind, out of everything experience. Right? That's always, if I'm having a tough time, if I start to just sing some Uman Rosh Hashanah songs, I'm lifted tremendously high out of the place that I'm in, right? And so, why is it awesome? Because he's telling us over here that those experiences are what we need to wake us up out of our sleep. And it's the Rosh Hashanah that is specifically the time that's supposed to wake us up out of sleep. And the Rosh Hashanah with Rabbi Nachman, right, is the ultimate experience to wake us up from our sleep. So I'm using this as an opportunity, like I like to sometimes, to do some advertising for Rabbi Nachman that everyone should try the next time they're able to do it. Let's hope that it's possible this year, with everything that's going on, to go and be by the cave of Rabbi Nachman on Rosh Hashanah. And I'm telling you that this experience will be the type of thing that can wake us up even in the deepest sleeps. They can lift us up from tremendous pain. It's my personal experience, and I think it's very much what he's talking about in this chapter. Any questions, comments, stories, Pesach news? I don't know. Yeah, Sandra.
Okay, so I want to talk about stay in your lane because we talk about it a lot. So
Yeah.
initially, stay in your lane to me was don't compare or compete with other people. You know, what your neighbors are doing, what your friends are doing, family and all that. But now, as I go on and learn more about Emunah, I feel like it's even beyond that. I feel like it's even within your own family. Sometimes stay in your own lane, just really it's your own experience, and you don't want to share with necessarily a family member or a partner or your children or whatever. So is that to that extreme? Because there's even parts, you know, when I'm raising up my Emunah, it's to think like I need to go through this by myself. I gotta go through this and break this for me, and only I can do this. So is it go that far?
It could be. You got to be careful. It's the Yetzer Hara is very, very, very tricky, because stay in your lane could be on either side of that statement, right? Stay in your lane could be, you know, despite the fact that I want to share this with my family, and I want them to experience what I'm experiencing, I know that it's not the right thing to do right now. And I know that it won't work. I know that might make things worse, so I have to keep that to myself, right? That's one side of stay in your lane with family. On the other hand, sometimes stay in your lane can mean, you know what? You need support, and you got to have your chaverim with you, right? You gotta talk to people, and you gotta go. You know, you need a support system of the right people, and sometimes it can be a move out of your lane to be like, I gotta do this myself. It could be. I'm not saying that about you necessarily, Sandra, right? But I'm saying the Yetzer Hara is very tricky, and we always have to be in that mode of contemplation and hisbodedus and checking ourselves to make sure that we know what our lane is, so we don't go out of it.
Don't you have to find isn't finding your lane a personal thing?
That's right.
Everybody's lane is different, right?
We got to be constantly figuring out what I think it's the number one. I mean, this thing that we're saying, find your lane, stay in your lane. We say it all the time using different words, right? This means also, you know, doing hisbodedus to try and understand who I really am. That's understanding what my lane is. To try and figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. That's understanding what my lane is, right? To appreciate, right? One of the most powerful things a person can do during hisbodedus is to begin to thank Hashem for a certain person in their life, right? And then talk to Hashem and thank Hashem for all the details about that person and all the experiences that you've shared with that person, and the amazing character traits they have and talents they have, and think about this person, and through appreciating such a person, right, we can understand why we have a connection to that person. We can begin to understand, why are we together, right? Why did I meet this person? Why was I put in the same city as this person? Why did we have this connection that brought us together? And now we're like, there's something that there's a reason why we're together. Like I can say this about my friend Shmuley. I can say this about my wife. I've done this with probably, you know, everyone that I know almost, right? Because then you can begin to understand, you know, why you're together with such people and why I need them. And then you can say, okay, this is my lane. And I see that in my lane, you know, there's this person who I need to, they're supposed to be in a different lane, right? This person I got to push out of my lane because I can't be, this person is pulling me down, negative, right? But I see I'm sharing a lane with this person. And I see that Hashem is putting us in the same lane. So I have to do something together with that person, right? So based upon recognizing what are the gifts that Hashem gives me, and why are they so amazing? What are all their good points? I can begin to understand what we're supposed to do together. Or I can begin to understand the tumah, the negativity of a person, and why that person is not meant to be in my lane. Right? So that's what I'm saying. The answer is you got to figure it out. Got to figure out what the lane is. Yeah, go ahead, Shmuel.
I just want to add one thing. It's open in front of me. So I was talking about in the Kutim Aran when Rabbi Nachman's talking about people who are asleep. So let's say, Sandra, let's say you find yourself waking up or awake. You're not asleep anymore. And I think if from what I know, you're on a journey and you're working on yourself, and I think you're awake. I don't think you're asleep, right? And when you talk about people, let's say who are close to you and, staying in your lane in regards to them, right? Like we may be talking about people in our lives who are not awake, who maybe they are asleep, right? And as we just said, Rabbi Nachman says that a person like that can't be woken up. And the only way that they could be woken up is with stories, right? It's kind of enclosed in something else. It's not so direct. So Rabbi Nachman says there's different reasons why it has to be that way. One of the reasons he says, for example, think about if you were healing a blind person who is, maybe they had their vision, or someone who's been asleep for 70 years, let's say, they haven't seen any light for a very, very long time, and you were starting to help, they were starting to open their eyes, or you were healing a blind person, you would have to do a couple things. You would have to, number one, protect their eyes, and you would also at the same time probably diminish the full strength of the light that was there. Because a person who's been asleep for so long, who hasn't used their eyes necessarily for so long, is not able to handle so much, right? So that's where Rabbi Nachman says, so, if you're, so to speak, showing someone the light, right? You can't just be like, it's right here, and blast them with it. It'll damage them more than it will help them.
Could take them away from it.
Take them away from it. It can actually damage them, right? It can, when you've been in a dark room for a long time and you go outside to the sun, it's hard, and yeah, you're right. You turn away. It causes you to move away from that light. So what you do with that practically, like Rabbi Gisselson said, he said it so I can say it. You have to figure out, but it's hard to, I've had this experience very strongly many times in my life with friends, with family, where you experience something and you want to share it with people, but they're not necessarily ready for all of it right now today. They have their own journey. So that's why I think it's so interesting, this method of enclothing things in stories. Mm-hmm. Is that seems to be the way Rabbi Nachman says to do it.
That is really an awesome idea. Yeah.
I like the stories.
What else, guys? Barrett, what do you got?
So I was just going to say that sometimes we're asleep at the wheel, and when we do wake up, we find ourselves in the wrong way, or like up, on one way, the wrong way on a one-way street, and we need somebody to stop us because we don't even realize that we're going the wrong way. So it just depends on what company you're in. If you're missing the signs, maybe you don't have a license to drive, whatever it is. But when you see that things keep going wrong, then it's time to stop, park, and recalculate, right? Mm-hmm. As we say. So it's really important that we're aware of that and that we're awake enough to be alert.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good mushal, by the way. Yeah. We didn't need to have the proper Waze guidance system.
There you go.
Like in the old days, in the earlier editions of like GPS car, whatever it's called, mapping, it would like say pause, recalculating, right? Nowadays it just does it quickly, but yeah.
And sometimes it takes, the police to come and kind of lock you in to make you stop.
Right.
So when things abruptly end like that, then it's also a way of stopping us in our tracks.
Yeah. Awesome. Anybody else? Anything going on? No?
Okay.
Laura, you got something?
It was funny because I was in Ottawa and I went to a market yesterday and they someone was saying, they can't eat bread anymore and stuff like that. And I didn't realize, I know pains in French is pain, but I never realized it was spelled P-A-I-N. So I was laughing, and now you're having this whole talk, and I like how you said about, it's like you have to poke it with a pin to deflate.
Uh-huh.
That was very interesting, because I never saw it that way. It was just plain simple. And then you said something else here. I just wrote little doodles everywhere, but I've been doodling everywhere.
Can you understand your doodles? That's the question.
Absolutely.
All right.
It's interesting what you're saying about eyesight as I am waiting for a cataract to be done.
Ah.
Right?
Refuah Shalema.
Thank you. Yeah. So I know what I write.
Okay, you're better than me because sometimes I can't read my own handwriting. So that's.
I can read. I just know I wrote it.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Laurie. Okay, guys. Everybody have an awesome, amazing week. And
What's it there,
yeah.
right? What did you say? Stop, park, and recalculate?
Yeah, like just take a class. You know how we talk about taking classes?
Oh yeah.
Just like evaluate.
The amber light, like the healing stone, amber, wait,
Yeah.
warning.
Amazing.
Ever hear it this way? Stop, park, and recalculate. Oh yeah. Never heard it that way. That's all.
That's got to be the quote from this class. We'll put it on the YouTube title.
Hashtag.
Hashtag stop, park, and recalculate. Okay, guys, have an amazing week.
Next week, chapter 15. Maybe we'll have a look and see if we're going to do all of it, or we'll put in the WhatsApp group what the plan is.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be more than 1 week, but it's an amazing, big, long chapter. So everybody, do your best to. And we'll be back on the Wednesday Likutei Moharan class at 9 o'clock. Also, all the best, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks.
Right.